In our previous talks, we came to the conclusion that we should raise our consciousness to a new level. As the consciousness is raised from mineral regime to plant regime to animal regime to human regime, even in the human regime, there are many, many layers, and we can raise it to a higher level. Now, it is easy to say why should we raise the consciousness, but how do we do it? And we will deal with this today in a little bit in-depth manner. I will touch upon two issues. One is that why do not we are not able to raise this consciousness easily. Why we remain engaged in the affairs of the world. And secondly, how we can actually achieve this process by understanding one's own self. In this, we will also take some support from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7 and chapter 13. So let's start this talk now. First of all, why do we have all these what we call in Hindi vikar or pravarti or vrati in our day-to-day conduct? We are always driven by forces outside. Sometimes your child is driving you that I want to go to a so and so school, I want to do this course, I want to buy this product, and he is driving you in a particular direction. Even if you have resources, you don't have resources, you have to organize your resources accordingly. Sometimes your wife is driving you in a different route. She wants to buy some diamonds, or she wants to buy a new car, or she wants you to shift to a new house. So you are driven in the race there. Whether you have the money or you don't have the money, you try to organize. Sometimes this kind of demands also create stress. It is not only your family, but also your neighbors drive you. Your employer in office drives you. Your employer will say, okay, you have to achieve this target today or in the next month. We have to sell so many, units of this particular product, or we have to achieve so much what you call profit in the coming 3 months. So these are the targets which are set in your job, set in your surroundings, in your social network. Your friends also have demands from you. So what happens is that these demands coming from all sides of our cohabitation keep pushing you in one or the other direction. These demands become firstly the cause of stress. Secondly, they keep you engaged in this world deeply. They never allow you to come out of this world. The engagement becomes deeper and deeper with every new demand put forward to you. And then we are in the race. We are in the race in this world. The race is for variety of things. That my neighbor has this car, I should have a car which is bigger than that. My neighbor has this house and I should have a house bigger than that. My friend's wife has got this particular sari, my wife should have something better than that. This comparative study is another very big, what you call, uh, point of stress. Firstly, the point comes from the demands which are raised from various sectors or various people or various surroundings. And then the demand comes from the comparative study that I want to do this because somebody else has done that. Whether we need it or not, that's not an issue. Issue is a comparison that I should have something better or higher than what my neighbor has, or than my friend has, or my brother has, or my other member of the family has. So these demands, these kind of comparative studies keeps you engaged into this world, and they keep creating what we call vikar. These are the two things, but then there are other regions for vikar. The third region for vikar is basically jealousy, that somebody has something, I should have it, and you start an internal process which causes a vikar, that you become jealous, and that jealousy is reflected in your behavior sooner or later. Then another vikar comes, that is, you become dishonest. For example, you are not able to get enough money to meet the demands of your surroundings or your family or of your friends, and then you try to cheat. Okay, I have to acquire so much wealth so that I can satisfy these demands. Now, how do I acquire this wealth? You tell lies, you cheat others, and you adopt practices which are not honest, which are not right. This happens. So all these demands push you in these directions, and these vikars start coming in your personality. The vikar starts with irsha, it starts with dishonesty, it starts with telling lies, it starts with, with anger. It gives rise to anger, then it gives rise to greed. So all these vikars, they come in our personality because of variety of demands which are put forward on us, and we accept these demands. This is not automatically happens. These demands are accepted by us, and then all these vikars, all these deviations in our personality start happening, and then they take a vrati, then they take a particular course, and that course becomes deeper and deeper, and then it becomes pravarti, it becomes your habit, it becomes part of our day-to-day behavior. So this is the what you call in very short term, the process how the vikars come into our personality, how we become what you call dishonest, our behavior becomes violent, anger starts coming in, we become greedy. All these wrong habits start coming into our personality because of these pressures. So the first important thing is that we should try and avoid these pressures on us. We should do what we can. We don't have to do comparison. We don't have to accept everything which is thrust upon us. We should remain stable. What we call in Sanskrit, there is a word dhrati, dhrat, that you are stable. Dharti comes from there, dhairya comes from there. So you have to keep your stability. Actually, the word dharma also comes from there, that you are holding, on to some ground. So you dharan karta. So you have to hold on to yourself. So that is first thing we have to understand in understanding the mission of life. That why these all kinds of ailments come into our personality. These are not physical ailments, but these are ailments imposed upon our mental structure, upon our intellectual structure, upon the overall conduct of our behavior. That is one thing. Now, second thing which we need to understand today is to understand things from part by part, or to understand the whole and then understand the part. Look at the science. Science tries to understand each part. They will analyze a branch of a tree, they will analyze a leaf of a tree, they will analyze a particular material. For example, they will analyze gold, or they will analyze iron or silver. They will analyze each of this material. There are millions and millions of material in this whole nature. They try to analyze each one of them, and they try to construct the what you call constitution of this universe by analyzing different materials. So this is going from part to the whole. For example, somebody tries to analyze our eyes and our hands, our nose and our foot and our fingers and our skin and our mind and all that, and then put together and say this is the human being. So this is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that you analyze the whole holistic thing first, and then you analyze each part of it. Now the difference is very, very vital here. If somebody analyzes your eyes and your ears and your nose and your hand and your feet, he cannot understand a human being. It's impossible. You put together the sum total of all these understanding, it will nowhere be close to a human being. The human being is not what you call a sum total of all these parts which constitute our body. So we have to actually understand the whole to understand the parts. That is why in Upanishads it's always said that you should try to understand that one particular thing which enables you to understand everything else. Because you cannot understand millions and billions of constituents that constitute this universe. Similarly, you cannot understand billions and trillions of cells and organs and all kinds of processes which are operating in our body system. So we cannot understand that. And even if we understand each one of them, a sum total of that is not human being. Similarly, the sum total of all the matter which you can analyze and put together their properties is not nature. So from this we derive that we have to understand the whole first, and then we understand the ingredients or parts which constitute the whole. And that is the way the religion, or religion, I do not mean this Hinduism, Buddhism, or Christianity and all that. Religion, I mean the basic laws of the nature that govern this entire process in this whole universe. That is religion. So we have to understand, the religion says that we have to understand the whole first, and then we will be able to understand the individual parts separately, or there would be no need to understand them that at all. So this is the second point we have to understand, that you have to go from samasti to vyakti, from totality to individuality. Then you can understand things better. And once you understand the totality, perhaps there would be no need for you to understand the individuality at all. So this is the second element we should understand. Now we come to a very important part, and I will take uh, uh, three verses from chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita to understand this little bit in depth. These verses are 12, 13, and 14 in the chapter 7. Now, verse number 12 says that whatever arises in your in your system, the human constitution, it comes from sattvagun, rajogun, and tamogun. These three qualities of nature, they give birth to all the tendencies that arise in your human constitution. That is the first part. The second thing is that all these three qualities, they arise from the Almighty, but Almighty is not in that. You see, this is very uh, interesting, that these three qualities which arise from the nature, they control all the uh, what you call bhavs, or all the tendencies, all the conduct of human personality. They govern. And these qualities arise from the Almighty. That is the second part. The third part is that though they arise from the Almighty, Almighty is not a part of that. I'll explain that how. And then the third part is that this constitutes uh, the Maya. This constitutes the overall illusion in which we remain entangled all the time. These are the three, verses from Bhagavad Gita which explain how we remain entangled into this world. Now, Satgun, Rajogun, Tamogun, they create different tendencies in our personality. Satgun leads you to clear thinking, to very honest conduct, to things which are transparent. Rajogun leads you to passion, to do things with a lot of energy. Like a businessman is driven by passion. He wants to all the time increase his profit, expand his business. That is the passion that is driven by Rajogun. Similarly, the kings, the administrators, they are also driven by Rajogun. That's why the ruler is called Raja, because he is driven by Rajogun. He has to have that passion that I should do better, I should improve the conditions of my people, I should provide them better life. So he is always passionate to do that. So that is the Rajogun which works. And then Tamogun is the one which leads you to what you call pramad, that is, you become indolent, you don't want to do much, or you want to just remain alsi, totally, lying down, not interested in doing things, or even if you do in a wrong way. So these three qualities which arise from the Almighty, they govern our inner system, and that system leads to driven though that system in combination with the pressures which are created on us through our colleagues, our family, our surroundings, they lead us to these what we call vikars. Vikar is the main reason for our uh, what you call deep engagement in the world in one way or the other. We have seen the deep engagement happens in four ways particularly. The first engagement happens in the form of earning wealth. The second happens in the term of earning power. The third, to acquire prestige, or what you call a status in the society. And fourth is to acquire knowledge. These are the four pillars which are driven by these three forces of nature and multiple forces surrounding us, and they are responsible for keeping us engaged in the world, and we remain under the control of vikar. So these are all external forces which are governing us. This is very important to understand. Now, how do we get out of it? How do we understand? Now, this is a very interesting question, but it is very easy to understand. And I think with some practice, each one of us can achieve that. Now, for that, we have to first understand the difference between Prakriti and Purus, or in chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, that has been described as Kshetra and Kshetragya, the difference between Kshetra and Kshetragya. Or we can call it the difference between matter and consciousness. Whatever name you give, doesn't matter. We have to understand that difference. Once we understand that difference, the mission of human life is achieved. That is the thing which keeps us grounded in this world all the time and keeps us rolling in the cycle of birth and death and birth and death. So if we want to get out of that cycle, we have to understand these differences. It is the same thing, Prakriti and Purus, matter and consciousness, Kshetra and Kshetragya. These are the same thing. So we will understand this, analyze this in little depth now. We saw this word Purus last time, and Purus means the owner of the city, Purmani city. And this city contains everything. That is what all the systems which are prevalent in this universe, they are all there inside our Pur, inside our body. That is Pur, and we call Purus because we are the owner of this body. And sometimes they call it nine gates, city of nine gates, because we have nine doors of the city. That is the two eyes, 2 ears, two nostrils, six, one mouth, seven, and two, one for sexual activities, and another for discarding the waste. These nine holes, they are the nine gates of this city. So this has also been used, the city of nine gates. So actually, this city is of nine gates. Now, Purus and Prakriti, or Kshetra and Kshetragya, or matter and consciousness. Now, that difference is the most significant difference to understand the entire, what you call, mission of life, to understand this universe, to understand the functioning of our own self. Now, I will take uh, a few verses from chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, and then we will get into the details of this whole process. Now, the very first verse says, in which the Krishna says, यह शरीर क्षेत्र है ऐसा कहा जाता है, और इसको जो जानता है उसको क्षेत्रज्ञ ऐसा उसके तत्व को जानने वाले ज्ञानी जन कहते हैं. क्षेत्र एंड क्षेत्रज्ञ. And then he continues to explain that process. So we'll come to that a little later. Now, what is Kshetra? Kshetra basically means the field. In the field, when you go, what happens? In the field, you have plants, you have seeds, you have fertilizer, the water comes into that, the air comes there, the sunlight comes there, and then the crop grows in the field with the help of all this. Similarly, this body is a field in which the water comes, the air comes, the sunlight comes from our sense organs. Various sense organs keep feeding all these ingredients inside. Then we have some vratij and pravartij which are fed through these sense organs. These, demands which I was telling you, and then the demands generated by our sense organs. All these demands and all these vratij and pravartij put inside this system that creates a crop inside, that creates a personality inside, which we call a human personality. So this personality is the result of a large number of factors which are operating inside as well as coming from outside. From outside, these factors come from our sense organs and they come from the demands raised. From inside, they come from the bhav, from the vrittis which we have, which are originating from satogun, rajogun, and tamogun. So this is what we call kshetra in brief. The kshetra is the matter. The kshetra is the matter in which the crop comes. The crop is fertilized, the crop is watered, the crop is given sunlight, the photosynthesis happens, all the activities happen inside this kshetra. Now, this kshetra has been explained with a very precision and a very scientific way in verses number 5 and 6, and I will read it out. हे अर्जुन, वही मैं तेरे लिए कहता हूं कि 5 महाभूत आकाश, वायु, अग्नि, जल और पृथ्वी का सूक्ष्म भाव, अहंकार, बुद्धि और मूल प्रकृति तथा त्रिगुणमयी माया, 10 इंद्रियां अर्थात स्रोत, त्वचा, नेत्र, रसना और घ्राण एवं वाक, हस्त, पाद, उपस्थ एवं गुदा, एक मन और 5 इंद्रियों के विषय अर्थात शब्द, स्पर्श, रूप, रस और गंध. Now, this is a very extremely scientific language. It goes further down, but this is verse number 4. 5 Panch Mahabhut. Panch Mahabhut we all know: Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal and Prithvi. Inka Suksham Roop. These are the one which are visible to us, but their invisible, non-manifest form of these 5. That is the first part. And these 5 also give birth to the 5 senses we have, 5 senses of perception we have. Because the sense of hearing is linked to the Akash, the sense of touch is linked to air, the sense of sight is linked to fire or sun, the sense of taste is linked to water, and the sense of smell is linked to earth. So these 5 senses and the 5 Panch Mahabhut, they are correlated in the body system, in our system. And then the 5 senses of action are also correlated to these 5. These are Vak, that is walking by foot, the hands, the holding things. Then you have the power to speech, that is third. And then the sense of recreation and the sense for disposal of the waste. So these are the 5 senses of action, which are also linked to these 5 elements. So this is one group of elements, and the 5 sense organs have what they call 5 tanmatras. 5 tanmatras of the 5 sense organs is Shabd. Shabd is for the walk, the hearing. Sparsh is for touch. Roop is for eyes. Ras is for taste, and Gandh is for nostrils, earth. So this is one group which constitutes the Kshetra. Then continues further down. इच्छा, द्वेष, सुख, दुख, स्थूल देह का पिंड, चेतना और धृति, इस प्रकार ये क्षेत्र विकारों सहित संक्षेप में कहा गया है. Now this is the constitution of this kshetra. This is all what we call nature. This is called prakriti. This is called matter. All this is matter. And this matter is actually controlled or driven by Kshetragya. Kshetragya is that jeev or that consciousness which makes this whole instrument work, and which actually is the what you call the owner of this whole equipment. But because these elements of the Kshetra are predominant and they are visible, they are tangible, we do not understand the difference between the two. So the Kshetragya is the consciousness which comes from the universal consciousness or from the Almighty directly. And this Kshetra is the constitution of nature. It is coming from the matter. It is coming from the things which are manifest, which are visible, which are tangible. And this is a proper science that five Panchbhut, they are, the known manifest part of those five Panchbhut. Then five senses of action, five senses of perception, how they are linked to these five Panchbhut, and then the five tanmatras of the five senses of perception. This is one part. Then the second part is what we call ichha, dves, sukh, dukh, stuldeka, pind. All this is the other part. So this constitutes kshetra. This is called padarth. This is called nature. This is called prakriti. Then the owner of all this is called kshetragya. That is the consciousness which runs this entire equipment. To take it in a very gross way, we have a refrigerator. Refrigerator is consisting of many parts. They are all connected and they operate. And you connect it to the electricity. Now electricity doesn't do anything, but without electricity no refrigerator can operate. It is absolutely docile. Just its connection makes it operate and it functions in a particular way. So this is what the Kshetragya does. Kshetragya doesn't do anything, but the very much its very connection into the Kshetra puts this Kshetra into action. Once that connection is gone, this Kshetra is also becomes inactive. It loses its activity completely. And that is what we call death, mrityu. So the connection of the Kshetra and Kshetragya brings this entire instrument into action. And this whole action is taking place because of the non-active force of Kshetragya or consciousness. That force is completely non-active, non-visible. But without that force, this Kshetragya, all these forces operating in Kshetragya, they become inactive, they cannot operate. So this difference we have to understand. We are not Kshetra, we are Kshetragya. For example, if somebody takes away one of my foot, in my thinking, I am not incomplete, I am complete. I am complete. Though my one organ may not be there, my body may be lacking something, but my personality is complete. A blind man may not be having his eyes, but his personality is complete. He is not missing anything. So we do not miss anything, even if some parts of our body disappear or they are taken away or we lose them for some reason, because that body is a different system. Maybe the body is not working properly, but the overall personality, which is the consciousness, that works properly. That consciousness, which is controlling this entire system, is not affected by, you know, some damage to one particular part or two particular parts of the body. Now, this difference between the consciousness and the matter is the crux. Once we know the difference, then you will start realizing that what Krishna said in chapter 2, that this consciousness, or what we call this Atma, or whatever name you give, or we can call it Kshetragya, whatever name we give, is not affected by outside forces. It's the water cannot make it wet. The fire cannot burn it. The weapons cannot cut it. The air cannot make it dry, because this is beyond the area of Kshetra. The Kshetragya is beyond Kshetra. This distinction, that you are Kshetragya. The body is at your disposal, the Kshetra is at your disposal, where all the forces are operating, where you can regulate those forces, like you go in a field where you can regulate water supply, where you can regulate the supply of seeds, where you can regulate the fertilizer input, where you can even regulate the sunlight. All these factors are regulated by the consciousness in the human body. If we are conscious of it, then we are able to do it. If we are not conscious, then this kshetra keep ruling us all the time. This kshetra means these five senses of action, five senses of perception, their non-manifest elements, then the rajogun, tamogun, and satgun, that is the nature part of it, and then you have desires, you have rag, you have dves. All these things keep ruling us all the time. They rule us so long as we are not making our consciousness as active ruler of this kshetra. So the whole purpose of human life is to recognize this difference, that kshetra is the one where all this fertilization, all these activities happen, but they cannot happen without the support of kshetragya. And kshetragya is myself. I can control the entire kshetra as a farmer controls the field. Same way, each one of us can control our field. This field which we call Purus, which is called a city, we are the owner of that city. In this city, multiple activities keep happening all the time. These activities are happening in the Kshetra, and they are happening with the support of Kshetragya, but Kshetragya is still inactive. Like the electricity is inactive in heater or in refrigerator or in computer or in any other machine, though the machine cannot work without electricity. So this is the difference we have to recognize. This difference, as soon as we recognize that human life gets transformed, then you become Kshetragya, you become consciousness, you become Atma, and the rest of it becomes a field, a padarth, a matter where all this fertilization happens, all these activity happen, and then you become the master of those activities. You do, and you don't want them to happen, they will not happen. If you want them to happen, they will happen. That is the state where we have to reach. That everything which happens in this kshetra should happen with my permission, with the permission of the consciousness, with the permission of Atma, with the permission of Kshetragya, which is, uh, you know, so much integrated in this. Now that integration is so deep and so close, the thread is very thin, and that is where we end up doing mistake all the time. When sense tells us to do something, we do not realize that it is kshetra, which is outside, which is matter, which is telling me to do something. We do not recognize it. We align with that sense and we keep doing it. We do not distinguish the difference between the two. The whole problem arises because we are not able to distinguish between kshetra and kshetragya, between prakriti and purus, between consciousness and matter. So we have to start with this process. First, this is the beginning, and then all the vikar will disappear. Because once you are able to recognize yourself as ruler of this instrument, then you will keep this instrument fine. Why will you allow it to have all kinds of problems? Nobody would allow that. Once you feel that I am the owner of this house, you will not allow any miscreants to live in that house. You will not allow thieves to live there. You will not allow, criminal elements to come and live there. Will you? You will not. Similarly, if we realize that I am the owner of this body, I am the consciousness, I am the Kshetragya, and everything happens in this Kshetra, then you will not allow these things to happen in the body. And the vikar, all the wrong tendencies which arise from time and again, they will slowly, slowly disappear. You will clean the system. That cleaning of the system will take away all those tendencies, all those pravartis, all those vikars away, and you will become absolutely peaceful, you will become calm, you will become cool. And that is what is the purpose of human life. Now, you can achieve that purpose through multiple ways. Some people follow the yoga technique, that is the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Niyam, you know, there are yam, niyam, uh, pranayam, pratyahar, asan. There are 8 steps leading to samadhi ultimately. Some people do it through tap, that is, they, uh, do hard uh, exercise to, what we call purify their body and their kshetra so that it is purified. That is called tap. Like you put uh, gold in the fire and it gets purified and it becomes suhaga. So it becomes absolutely pure. So that is what is tap. So some people do it through yoga, some do it through tap, some people do it through bhakti. That is, you devote, you surrender yourself to the Almighty, and you, you know, become known entity, and Almighty takes over you in every respect, and that is called bhakti. Then you become completely surrendered soul to the Almighty. You lose the kartapan. The kartapan is gone. The doer is gone. The the ahankar is completely gone. Then some people do it through gyan, knowledge, that they acquire what we call knowledge from various sastras. They uh, think about it, and then the practice of that knowledge. The knowledge itself is not enough. The knowledge has to be meditated upon, and then you have to act on that. The practice has to be done. It's like, you look at the menu looks great, the food is very nice, you say this, then that doesn't give you any satisfaction, because that is only the shastra knowledge. Then you meditate, then you think, oh, this particular dish is made of these 5 things, and you think about it, but that also doesn't give you satisfaction. Satisfaction only comes when the dish is served and you eat it yourself. Then only you get the final satisfaction, the what we call the ultimate, pleasure of it. So the ultimate pleasure from knowledge does not come just by reading, but it comes by first reading and understanding, then meditating upon it, and then practicing on it. The final thing is what we call the gyan. Gyan is basically to experience the truth. That is gyan. So you have the path of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, you have the path of tap, you have the path of bhakti, you have the path of knowledge, and then there are multiple paths, multiple, you know, uh, sages have told you different paths to reach there. But ultimate aim is to understand the distinction between your atma and your sarir, your, the consciousness and the matter, the Chetra and the Kshetragya. And once you understand this difference, then I think slowly, slowly your life undergoes a miraculous change. Then you remain unaffected by all the things which I told you in the beginning, the demands put forward by your family, by your society, by your employer, and by other forces of the nature, and also the internal functioning of Satgun, Rajgun, and Tamogun inside the body. They are all neutralized once we can recognize the difference and once we identify ourselves with consciousness. Then you become Atma, and then you actually become part of Paramatma, because Atma is part of Paramatma, and therefore the divinity starts living inside you. And that is what I call raising of the consciousness. You raise the consciousness to a new higher level. And this is what I believe is the purpose of human life, which is not possible in any other form of life. It is not possible for an insect or for a plant or for an animal or for anybody else. It's possible only in the human existence. Even in the life of Devtaj, that is not possible. Devtas also have to come to the human form and pass through the same steps as we were discussing in the last few days to reach that mission of human life. And that mission will take you to what we call the drop will reach the ocean and you will become the ocean. So I'll stop here and we complete this particular what you call topic of our discussion today. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.